I sensed the demon as soon as the wind shifted, a strong aura of power enriching its way into my mind. Though I was only human myself, there was no doubt about it. The clearing was disbanded into a deadly calm, a dangerous fury that also entered Akaza's eyes as soon as he caught wind of the demonic presence as well. When he told me to run, I hadn't been expecting to obey him at first. I'd been hesitant, a foolish mistake. If I were to guess correctly, mere seconds could mean the difference between life and death in a situation such as this. But something about the way he said it. He wasn't angry. Well, in a way, he was. But another tone hitting at his voice. That was what made me pause for those few precious seconds. It was fear. Even if it was just the smallest amount, I was there. I could see it in his widening eyes when he'd asked me to run. Please, he said. The single word was probably made up by choice, the end of the conflict as to whatever I would say and help him. But based on what he'd said about this demon, Akaza hadn't been scared for himself. I knew that was much true, and for his sake, for his benefit and well-being, I decided to run, sprinting through the park by means of shoving away any worry I had for the demon I'd left behind. No words came from the area, as if the trees themselves were watching that would partake between the two deadly beings amongst themselves to figure out who would walk free. If a battle really had to occur, running damn well was my best option. I wasn't going to pretend I had enough experience slaying demons. Nothing. Not a single noise was ushered from the area I'd left behind. I swallowed my worries, focusing on finding my way back to the townhouse. Akaza had said he would meet me. There was nothing to worry about. As I ran, it also became so very difficult to push away the guilt of leaving, the guilt of knowing I wasn't good enough to have been part of that fight anyway. But Akaza's words came back to me, the look in his eyes. It was the only reason I had listened. And so I used any and all speed I could and find my way back, trusting the demon and his advances. Akaza stared at the upper moon. The demon's multicolored eyes crinkled in amusement as Doma chuckled. The forest had fallen into a deadly calm. Not even the number 2 demon's footsteps were heard as he approached, and yet Akaza watched one of his own slowly walk over towards him. His own thoughts were of the young assassin. She better have shoved that stubbornness away and listened to me for her life. It was the right call, sending her away, because as soon as Akaza had sensed it, he knew the content of this meeting would be, and well, as what Doma had come here to talk to him about. Make it home safe, Yen, Akaza slightly whispered. Is everything okay? Doma exclaimed, only a few feet away from him now, the moonlight reflected off of the light-colored hair in the iridescent manner. For some reason, the only anger Akaza even more. It's felt like ages since we last spoke, my friend. Akaza gritted his teeth, staying where he was. We aren't friends, Doma. Doma laughed sharply, causing Akaza to sneer in response. I had a feeling you'd say such nonsense while I arrived. Doma then said, stepping back a few steps to lean back against one of the thick trees that surrounded the area. He propped up one of his legs against the trunk, crossing his arms and observing Akaza. But despite your words, I consider you my friend, and friends are obliged to check up on one another, are they not? Akaza's hands began to twitch, finding it oh so very difficult to stay still in the presence of the demon he truly hated. You need to leave, Doma. His enemy frowned, his lips turning downwards. But I just arrived. Akaza walked straight up to him, unable to hold himself back. What exactly did you come here for? He asked him, attempting to control his breathing. Doma smiled, eyes crackling once more. Well, he began, crossing his arms before continuing with a long breath. I'm sure you're aware that most of us in the upper ranks are aware of your little arrangement. I am, Akaza said through clenched teeth. Unfortunately, word has gone around to some of our other friends as well, the demon said with an excruciating sigh, which I'm also certain you're aware of. A glance from Akaza. "What is your point, Doma?" He grinned. "Master's beginning to wonder how things are progressing with your mission, and of course how things are going with the new toy he has found." Akaza froze at his words. Doma seemed to sense it. He continued. "An assassin, is she?" he mused. "How special! She must be indeed. Are things progressing well?" Feeling his own heartbeat begin to thunder ever so slightly, Akaza didn't allow a single movement falter in the act towards Doma. "Things are fine," he responded, feeling his voice clipping with each word. A short, uneasy begin to grow in Akaza's gut, a feeling that began to show soon as Doma had brought up the young assassin in which he had been assigned to. "How exciting! I'm looking forward to having the pleasure of meeting her," Doma exclaimed, clasping his hands together, and Akaza didn't respond. "I suppose," he added with a grin towards Akaza, "if she happens to fail, we can allow ourselves to—" A lick of his pale lips. "Deluve on her? Her power's surely remarkable. Is that why she smells so delicious?" That was enough to provoke Akaza. He moved, swinging his fist before Akaza could even finish his taunting words. However, his enemy easily deflected his blow, moving away with a chuckle. "Is someone in a bad mood today?" Akaza's voice showed and sounded from behind him. Akaza whirled a roar, threatening to take a hold of him in utter annoyance. The multicolored-eyed demon only giggled at his attempt. "Let's not cause a scene here, brother," Doma said, taking a step back from Akaza. Akaza clenched his fist, staring and glaring at the demon. "Explain why you're here, Doma, or I'll kill you." The upper-two demon only sighed, pouting slightly. Fine, he waved with a sleight of his hand. "I only came to request of our master, simply to see how things are going with our new experiment." "I know that already, and you told. Everything is fine. You can leave now." Akaza's words were stark and to the point, finding himself itching for Doma to leave, far, far away from him and Yen. "That isn't well, unfortunately," Doma smiled. "I also came to remind you of something else, my dear friend." The sun was beginning to rise by the time Akaza entered to the townhouse. It hadn't taken me long to find my way back, even with the worry coating my guilt. The streets had been utterly deserted, the festival practically being shut down by now. Everyone had mostly likely returned to their homes, or left the city in general. I was the only one out of this hour. In a way, I didn't particularly listen to Akaza's command, because as soon as I had arrived at his townhouse, I hadn't gone inside. Instead, I found myself sitting on the porch, scanning the area for any sign of my tattooed friend. It felt like hours in itself until his figure approached. The entire time, I couldn't sit still. I'd begun pacing, questioning, roaring through my mind at what was happening by the damned river. I couldn't escape the fear that crawled in its way into my gut, like someone knowing feeling that even if Akaza was okay, something else was surely going wrong. Something had felt wrong, and I somehow couldn't shake the feeling. However, seeing him approach the porch, a small amount of worry dissipated. He's okay. He's alive. A relief threatened to make me collapse on the spot. The sky was turning a lighter blue, signaling the upcoming of the new day, and yet my demon, he was simply walking, fist clenched and head tilted down, as if the sun was the least of his worries by now. Despite this, my heartbeat began to increase as I got up abruptly, my eyes widening slightly as I watched him approach. Akaza stopped only a few feet away from me, glancing up at me once, just a slight, single glance. I wouldn't have thought much of it at first, but something that glance made my heart drop down into my stomach, because the look in his golden eyes, the last look he had given in the park, was full of worry and fear. But this looked as empty. It was devoid of any emotion at all. And to me, that perhaps was the worst look on him I'd ever come across. It was a look of defeat. Even so, this single glance at me, I could tell he was still felt something. Akaza gave me a head-to-toe scan as he walked by, a flash of what seemed like relief approaching in his gaze. The way he looked at me, his newfound attitude, it had struck me frozen, if only for a moment. Akaza? I breathed, watching him brush past me and walk directly into the townhouse. He ignored me, as if it weren't for the single glance. I would have thought he never would have realized I was there, or even worse, that he was choosing to ignore my presence. Akaza, I said, raising my voice a little more, following him to the house. What happened back there? It was more like a demand than a question. The demon stood by the door, not meeting my gaze as I walked in. He held onto the knob, waiting for me to enter before closing it behind me with a soft clit of the wooden frame. Still, he never answered me. I frowned up at him, taking a step closer. What's going on? Why aren't you talking to me? I asked, becoming slightly annoyed by now. There was no reason, no sign to let me know what had even heard me in the first place. Akaza then turned away from me and walked further into the house. My frown deepened, and I lurched for him, attempting to grab his forearm, and surprisingly, he didn't stop me from doing so. Hey, I sternly spoke, coming around to face him, my grip tightening on his pale arm. You need to tell me what the hell is going on. You tell me to run, only to return later without uttering a single word about any of the shit that is happening. What gives you any right? I breathed, unaware of why I was becoming so angered of all of a sudden. After a few moments, he finally looked up at me, clearly becoming annoyed with my own presence as well. His pink brows furrowed together, mirroring my own look. Even so, the fact that he acknowledged me at all was enough to make me feel a bit more better and at ease, though I could still feel he held on to demanding look in my eyes, not allowing him to face away from me. Go to sleep, Yen. You need your rest, he said, his voice distant, tired, and his words made my grip loosen ever so slightly. Akaza used that as an opportunity to brush off my hold on his arm, not aggressively, but enough to make it clear. He took a step away from me, unable to meet my eyes once more. We begin training again tomorrow night, so sleep while you can. There was something so off about his words. No, not his words. They may be derived of them. Something was wrong. So we're just going to keep this from me then? He didn't even look at me, nor did I ever give a response. It was simply waiting for me to do as he said, to go to bed and sleep. And for some reason, it hurt. It hurt more than I ever expected something like this to hurt. A panic began to raise in me at the thought, my emotions starting to skyrocket. His words, as if last night our words and actions towards each other just never happened. He was so dismissive at it all. That's what this was. No, he was dismissing me as a whole. The reaction was as painful as a slap to the face, a flash of pain before it falters, growing into an aching bruise that burns more afterwards than when it first deals. Fine, I said, trying to will my voice into something a lot more powerful than the way it came out as, hardly more than broken whisper. That was all I'd said, and without waiting for him to respond, one I doubt I would ever get from him, I walked away, upstairs and into my room for the rest of the day. And as soon as I walked into my bedroom, I spotted the new supplies in which Akaza had brought in. The colors, the paper, the canvases, the brushes. What a joke. I turned away, dismissing the plans of hoping to use it for the first time tonight. So much had occurred in only a few hours, yet Akaza still refused to share with me what had happened after I ran away. Was he upset with me for listening to him? For actually obeying him? No. He revealed to see me in one piece. I could sense it from the single first look he had given me. There was no mistaking that. It has to be what happened in that damn park once I'd left. It was a demon. He knew. Whatever had caused Akaza's change in mood, it had to do with whatever had happened between him and this demon he seemed so worried over me for. On that note, I knew that whatever was happening, it was due to this deal Akaza and I struck, a deal that I simply had to obey and hardly knew much about. But despite all of this, one part of me that I had found growing happier tonight, when I'd been dancing, shopping, talking to Akaza, the part of me that was now filled with sorrow. Sorrow at Akaza's dismissal. And that day, I couldn't bring myself to look at my own supplies. I couldn't bring myself to see the demon, knowing he didn't wish to see me. But I also laughed at myself. I laughed at the fact that, because of everything he'd done for me, he cared an emotional support, that he had truly thought about me as anyone other than the assassin he was training. A simple detour at the festival, even that was a part of his training. He was a demon. I wasn't sure why I had to always remind myself of that fact. I shouldn't even be surprised by his actions. He was a murderer, a killing machine bound to utter perfection from centuries of training. He does not care about you. It was a tough pill to swallow, to remind myself to keep my own distance. I scolded myself ever believing he would feel something for me. He had other priorities, like with the demon he had met again last night. I was not his main goal. It was just goddamn frustrating to have any hope. Hope for what? To have him want to be around me, to want to have a relationship with me alongside the deal we made, to have a real connection with anyone. No, not just anyone. I wanted one with him. No, I doubted was ever something he wanted as well. He'd probably found me getting too close, too comfortable, and now he was pushing me away. Before, that would have hardly bothered me. I was used to such behavior from others. It was why I'd never allowed myself to get close to them in general. But even so, I had felt my guard falling around Akaza. Maybe because I was so completely fooled, or maybe because I figured he was different. But in the end, it was probably a mix of both. It was so difficult to get any rest that day, especially when my thoughts were as restless as I'd ever been before. We're doing something different today, Akaza said from beside me that next evening, the two of us on our way as our usual training grounds, or so I thought. What do you mean by that? I asked. I was beginning to keep my own distance from him, only speaking when I knew I had to. If Akaza were to deliberately ignore everything that we'd experienced last night, as though it never happened, I was going to do the same. Though it wouldn't be nice, I thought. It would have been nice to have someone who grew to care and like me for who I truly was, to have someone who wasn't disgusted by my choices. I was truly fooled for believing Akaza would be any different from any other individuals in my life. We're heading into the forest again tonight, he stated, leading me back into the trees that were held away from the city. All right, I said, not questioning why we weren't training by the usual river again today. Our usual walks weren't taken in comfort silence, however. This time it was strangely off, which wasn't a surprise. Akaza kept the conversation light and straight to the point, something he usually did beforehand, although this time his words were chipped, his eyes rarely ever meeting my own. I couldn't discern what he was feeling, and I had to swallow all my questions as to what had happened last night. What had changed him? What had changed between us? I ignored all, simply following him by means of seeing how things would play out. I wasn't going to be embarrassing myself any further by annoying him to tell me. Instead, I kept reminding myself of who he was, a demon, as well as what meant for who I was to him as well. I could tell he was dismissing me, but what I truly didn't understand was why, and so I stayed silent unless spoken to, putting my mind elsewhere. The forest was exactly as I remembered it to be, not an inkling of light shimmering through the trees. The only way I knew which was to go by the following sound of Akaza's steps in which I knew he'd proposed made audible for the exact reason. I pushed away any sense of gratefulness. That was until he eventually approached a clearing in the forest, a breaking out of the roof of leaves above us, streaming of moonlight flowing down, fluttering through the treetops, if it was only light available of the entire forest from what I could tell. Akaza led me there, from his final becoming more visible, with this silvery glimmer from the moon. I frowned, following his silentness, biting my own tongue from voicing any or all questions I had about why it was where we had been. Before I could even think any more on the matter, though, the demon in front of me stopped, going so still I would have thought everything else around me had frozen as well. The only thing telling me and providing me otherwise, however, was a silent shift in the wind, causing a small amount of dismay of his pink vest and ties of his baggy pants to move. I came to his side, pushing aside any and all thoughts of the way he looked uttered in such ethereal lighting. It had always captivated me before, as if he were born with the night itself, as though he belonged here. I had to tell myself to look away from his powerful form, despite every part of me beginning to feel drawn to him. His elegant voice broke the crisp silence between us, and though it was still distant, I still found it comforting, the way it always was. Today's training is going to be a bit different. I frowned, looking ahead at the clearing in which he was facing, the two of us observing a still life of the forest. You said that already, I snapped. And are you going to be giving me any more information other than that? I asked, glaring at him, and I probably imagined it, but I could have sworn Akaza's lips twitched ever so slightly, a shine of amusement coming back to his dead, ridden eyes, though it was gone again in an instant when he spoke again. Remember a while ago when I taught you about a special technique of breathing? He said, still staring ahead. I frowned, hardly recalling much about it. It must have been a while when I'm not entirely being myself. That's when I turned out so much. Briefly, I mumbled, crossing my arms and hoping he couldn't detect my lie. He sighed, another hint of smile coming to his lips. We're going to be practicing that. And with that, the pink-haired demon walked directly into the middle of this clearing, turning to face me. I glared, narrowing my eyes before following him. However, I noted that something was off this time. It didn't take me long to realize, though. One look at the demon, and it was easy to tell. It was off because there was no thrill this time. There was no sense of excitement from either of us. Akaza didn't meet my gaze, only waiting impatiently for me to join him. The thought sent my gut into a twisted mess. It was so different, the way he looked at me now. There was no welcoming smile, no excitement or strategies from him. Like everything other times we'd been, this was so different. Something was wrong. I couldn't get the thought out of my head. And even as Akaza had begun to teach me about the breathing technique, something about the connection, constant breathing, in which would ultimately help my concentration overwhelm performance and resolve, it was becoming impossible for me to focus, not without that nagging feeling that something big was to come. Something was ultimately going to change. Akaza knew it, but would not tell me at all.